this is me, HMO sales expert. First qualified as an estate agent. My first job, I did work experience as an estate agent prior to that. As a little stroke bag in Chester, I went into estate agents stapling photographs on the particulars. So it was pre-internet. This was 1921. And then I went actually into estate agency early 2000s. And it was literally just when Rightmove was kicking off. And I'm quite thankful of the time that I went into estate agency. In the 80s and 90s, estate agencies and valuers, they would be regarded as, you know, your doctor, your architect, your estate agent. You know, you'd have all these professionals in your town, and they would be regarded as the group of professionals. Would you class an estate agent nowadays in that bracket of group of professionals? So over the course of the last 20 years, estate agency and selling properties has turned from a sales professional job into just literally a marketing job. All it is now, marketing, and the offices and branches are just full of people that are good at marketing properties to sale. The whole industry's dumbed down to the point where you've got lack of experience in the industry. So I'm quite thankful of when I went into it, because I was thrown at the front desk, had some drawers next to me, buyers come in, there was no internet, you hadn't seen anything, you're just going through the drawers and you're trying to cross-sell and upsell, and you just learn how to talk to people about property. So thankful I went into that time. The first HMO I sold in Chester, first HMO I went in, my boss got there before me and sellotaped a condom to a broom handle. I'll never ever forget it. It put me off HMOs for about another year. I thought, if this is multi-let properties, there was an HMO student let, and my boss did a joke on me. But I actually started selling HMOs through a estate agency in Chester, 2004, 2005. There was no such secret, really. They weren't licensed. As I said previously, they were just bed sits, basically. And obviously, over the course of those years, specialised in HMOs full-time from 2018. Prior, so the gap between still being in property 2004-5 onwards, like a lot of people, did a few deals, tried a bit of sourcing, and I realised that there's a bit of a gap in the market for who's actually advising on the valuations and the sales of HMOs. And everything that we've talked about today already, most of the education is about setting off, going through planning, finding the deal. You know, sometimes you get education around. The education in HMOs tends to stop at the refinance normally, and the refinance is classed as I've hit my target, I've arrived at the finishing point. But a few people go beyond the refinance and talk about the tenancies, how to run them, how to optimise them. So there's a little bit further that certain people go into. But who's in the space actually say, well, why are you going into HMOs in the first place? Well, sort of maybe to retire early, to build a pot, to leave your job, whatever it is. You know, at some point you're going to end up selling these HMOs because that's the way it's got to go. Nobody in the space really talks about that as an eventuality that you should prepare for over a longer term. My worst clients are the ones that phone me up and say, I can't get off the bridge, can you sell my HMO yesterday? And as Omer's slide before, where you've got the triangle with speed, what was it, speed?
Stability, yeah. Flexibility and cost,
I'm in the same boat, and Ian said the same as well, where with the planning side of it, when people come to him when there's a problem. So it's about talking about the values of HMOs in advance and putting that content out, because even if you're this guy here, you said you're just about to start, you're doing your first one through, getting to figure out who wants to buy it, what's it going to be worth, and how do I make sure it's always saleable. That'll stay with you for 3-4 years. So when you pull the trigger, you've got a saleable asset. Because what's the point of looking after cash flow over a 5-year period if you end up underselling that asset 20% when it comes to sell? You might as well just open your door at that point and let all your cash flow flitter away for 5 years. Everyone talks about protecting the cash flow and looking after refinance the best interest rates, but it's a case of optimising your sale, getting the best sale price as well, because it does work. So, did I miss anything on there? I didn't complete on 750 HMOs, did I? I missed that little bit. So over the years, and as Omer referred to, investment funds, pension funds, REITs, individual buyers, high net worths. I might notice I was a little bit late coming over to lunch because I nipped over to a hotel over the road to meet another investment fund that's now looking at the HMO space. So I'm constantly thinking, who's going to buy HMOs? Wherever you are in the country, there's a buyer type. There's a buyer type that wants to attach to a tenant type. They might want social housing, they might want professional, they might want student. And there's all of this different information constantly. It's not a case of just chuck them in the air and you're going to get the same buyer everywhere. And already this year alone, I mean, that's jumped up. I did, we had a stall at the Property Investor Show on, what day is it, Wednesday, and we had 300 HMO sale leads come in a day for people. So obviously it's clearly a situation where there's a lot of people wanting valuations, a lot of people looking to exit out of HMOs. They're the most transient property type. You buy buy-to-let, you keep them for 20 years. You buy commercial, you keep them for 20 years. You buy a family home, unless you get caught with your pants down, you're going to keep that for 20 years. You buy a HMO, a lot of people sell those HMOs prematurely because they rush in, they over-leverage, they have JVs, all of these different things, all the variables, all are over-promised on the courses initially because they think HMOs is going to be a doddle and they come in and there's a little bit of management. So HMOs are the most transient property type. So if you're in a market where there's always a constant flow of stock coming in, the best thing to do is make sure that yours are prepared. So when you decide to take to market, you've got the best HMOs. You know, the buyers appreciate what you've got and you know which buyers to aim for. So the thread of today with me is how to calculate the value of a HMO. So I'll tell you all of where I come from the valuations of the HMO, and primarily I'm looking for sales purposes, who's going to buy it, but also, for example, last week I had a meeting in Manchester with a prolific developer who gave me his and his clients' most recent 20 refinances in Manchester. So I'm collecting refinance. You've told me your refinance data 10.17. I've got it there. So you're constantly getting all of that information and data. But the key to that, how to calculate the value of a HMO, why that's important to you. Because I'm not going to ask you to give me your property today to sell. It's not about that. HMO sales expert, but I see my role more in this sector as pre-advice, preparation, giving everybody the best chance at some point to exit out. And ultimately that benefits my business. What I wanted to do a little bit, like Ian did, just clarification when we're talking about certain things, so we all know what we're talking about, because I quite often get asked the questions, and when we do the Q&A in a minute, some of you are going to go, what's the gross yield for Sweden? What's the gross yield for Nigeria? What's the gross yield for Timbuktu? You know, because everyone wants to know what that gross yield is, but I just want to establish there's a lot to get between A and B to get to the gross yield. Ultimately, it arrives at a gross yield. You've got an income and you've got a price. But just so we're all clear on, you know, the gross rental income by the value, the refinance value or the purchase price, whatever that ascertained value is. So, for example, if you've got a 30 grand a year income HMO, and that HMO is 300 grand, then it's a 10% gross yield. Are you all fairly okay with what I'm on about with gross yield? Net is something completely different. Net is very personal. So there's certain fixed nets, if that makes sense. There's certain sort of fixed things that are good, you know, utilities, that sort of stuff. But then net is very personal to you, your lending, your circumstance, how you manage it. But with gross, it's just that top broad brush. So it's important that we all understand, although we arrive at the gross yield for every HMO that I value or we value, there's many factors that go into determining the GDV or the sales value of any HMO. And I get a lot of lenders, I get a lot of surveyors on behalf of lenders PM me and say, oh, you haven't got any comps for this, you haven't got any comps for that, because they do actually want to try and get these HMOs valued up a lot of the time. But I would say, in particular, something like Southend, where you were there, that just says to me that Paragon are just getting to a point where they want to see some sold data. They want to see a line in the sand that it's actually, if we need to liquidate, is there a buyer market at a certain level? But it can't always be constantly based around refinancing. It gets easier the closer you get to bricks and mortar, or the closer you get into central London, because the lender confidence changes. But further Midlands and north you go, you need a lot more around, lender approval. So what variables come into play when we're determining the value of a HMO? So these starting points, first thing I do in particular, in a minute we're going to run through a property that I've picked just at a random location, and we're going to look at changing different variables and seeing what the price comes out at. A lot of you may be owning properties in the southeast or looking to develop HMOs in the southeast. My first starting point, you've always got a bricks and mortar baseline of anything, even if it's sui generis, even if it's commercially valued. And the difference between Omer's valuation on that Burnhill, the Burnhill Drive Up shop, which I've been to in the south, it's the baseline bricks and mortar lender confidence. So they get more, they're happier to reduce yields and lend higher because the starting point is right. You can operate in those high value areas. So as a starting point, the bricks and mortar, and if you take that the opposite way around, and there's people in the room I value for in Wigan, places like that, and the further north you go, the further away you're trying to get from the bricks and mortar value. So we're having to add in more USPs just to justify that change. It isn't a case of, do we all get too many Serco lease HMOs emailed to us at 8% gross yield in Runcorn? It's not a case of just doing one or two things and suddenly it's worth 3 times the value. Cash buyers only, that kind of thing. So obviously the starting point's there. Size, stroke beds. So really careful, as it's been brought up quite a few times today, when we say beds, usually, because the preference for a lot of HMO owners is single occupancy, usually when we say beds, we're saying people as well, we're saying beds and tenants, but the distinction on the planning is beds and people are different. Planning class use has a big play on value. Obviously the revenue, I call that revenue, so the gross income in general, the condition, and the local or regional yield band, and this is something that a lot of people are really interested in because they want to sort of map out what their GDV might be in any area and think, I'm thinking of going to Stoke-on-Trent. Richard, can you tell me the regional or the local yield band for Stoke-on-Trent so you can start to have a little think about things? So just nailing in a bit of detail on the bricks and mortar value. So as I said before, it's the baseline for all of our values really. And I know that the majority of the HMOs are going to go above that level, and the majority of HMOs have got more USPs added in, or not, if they've got incorrect planning or whatever it is. But to give you an example, recently we valued a HMO in Clapham that was valued by a local agent at 1.25 million. I couldn't get anywhere near that as a H. It's just, so we advised the client, it's a bricks and mortar sell to a family. It's way too, the bricks and mortar is way too high. So that's the extreme on one side. But if I'm also valuing something thinking, this is a 100 grand terraced house here, and someone's come to me on their sales expectations, they're putting 400 grand. I'm thinking, I've got 300 grand to try and make up with the rest of these USPs. How am I going to achieve that? So it establishes the likely buyer type and their motivation. So again, it's quite London centric because we're in the middle of London here, but I would imagine quite a few of you may be considering investing in other locations. When I say establishes a likely buyer type, you get people that go yield chasing, you get people that want cash flow, you get people that want to buy cheap, add value, you get people that just want to sink capital into bricks and mortar and they don't really care about what the gross yield is, they're just happy to buy something in Balham or something in any of the London boroughs where there's going to be capital appreciation, takes the pressure off the yield. This fund that have just come in today only wanted close to bricks and mortar, inside the M25, that kind of thing. So, for me, it establishes who I'm going to approach. Obviously, it dictates the north and south, and there is a big change in the bricks and mortar. There's little pockets in those areas, and it starts to flag up for me lender concerns, which we talked about there. A lot of these refinances that come in, lenders get concerned with things being. Someone said, I think it was me, said it looks like a house, it smells like a house. Even with sui generis. Well, I'm going to go back into tenant sustainability in a minute, but you see the lenders start to get a little bit nervous. And even if OMA, because of your experience, can get you this particular product, can get you this particular rate, this particular, it doesn't mean your buyer can.
Yeah.
So you're taking a product to a market that you might be able to refinance up at that level. All of a sudden you take it to the sales market, your next buyer ends up with 100 grand less, and it's a down value in the sales force. That's why you see so many sales flip-flop on Rightmove. And I'm looking at the value added during the development. So that's a starting point from where I'm at with the bricks and mortar. The size and the bed. So tenant trends and desirability. If there's a HMO that's too big, if there's a HMO that's too small, where the cash flow doesn't stack. I've got a 3-bed HMO, I want to sell it 8% gross yield, 16 miles outside of Barnsley town centre. It's probably not going to sell. So 6 beds, 7 beds, 8 beds, the sweet spot of managing, going into something too big too soon, that kind of thing. I'm starting to profile what would be the desirability and the saleability of this. And again, lender support for varying different sizes. We know that we can get a kind of hybrid commercial lending for 6-bed all-en-suite. I've got clients who are telling me that they're refinancing commercial 5-bed all-en-suites now. I won't be able to tell me differently, but and then obviously a lot of people that come in and buy ready-made HMOs, they're deciding they don't want to do this. They don't want to go in, work with builders, work with planning, everything about adding value. They don't want to go anywhere near that, the ready-made buyers. So I'm thinking, okay, well, if it's a 6-7-bed all-en-suite that's had a 200k treatment, that's worth something because it's got the pain factor, the experience factor. So I'm able to then say to the buyers, look, go on then, off you go to Southend and try and create that for less, because you're going to do what I did with builders and make a complete hash of it. So, you know, it's that difficulty factor that adds value. Income amount. One of the things that I do is a real broad brush. When someone sends me a HMO, I divide their income by the number of rooms, divide it by 12, and look at their average room rate per month. If it's an 850 in Southend, I go, you know, that's going to be a good HMO. If I divide it by 12, it comes out 433, £100 a week. I'm going to go, right, okay, we've got a different beast here. The acid test for an established HMO, once the new build premium's gone, what is it paying per room? That's the only acid test that counts really, because everything we're talking about is based on the income it produces. And tenants don't lie. It'll either be hitting you, it'll be hidden somewhere in your running costs. When I look at it, look at your voids, look at your, you know, your tenant churn because your rooms. So somewhere along the line, the tenants will tell me if that's a well-run HMO or in condition before you turn up. Very rarely do I see an under-rented HMO where I go, bloody hell, put your rooms up by 200 quid. And obviously economies of scale. So on larger HMOs, Virgin Wi-Fi is still 50 quid for 4 people, 6, 7, 8 people. You've got general economies of scale, which in this market now with utilities and running costs, dresses elsewhere with you know, interest rates, that kind of thing. Obviously the economies of scale does help with the saleability of HMOs for me to pass it through to a buyer. I've gone through this in big detail today with everybody else, but just to reiterate, they affect value for me, and they affect saleability, they affect access to lending. So obviously bricks and mortar value could be a little bit above bricks and mortar depending on the USPs. Hopefully we're aiming for some sort of commercially derived valuation, where we will be, only if it's correctly in place. If we go out to a property, we said today, I quite often go out to HMOs from older landlords that if they are 7, they've got 7 rooms, they've got 7 people in, and it's like, oh, it's okay, I just put my planning app in to get my street genders before I sell. What about the acoustics? What about the sound? What about all these extra things? Is the council just going to allow it to be an application, or have you got to knock a bedroom off and just class it as a C4? It's going to affect value. So the planning class uses only add value if they're correctly in place and they marry up with the license, and you know, you've got all of those things in place. So yeah, and obviously commercial lending availability, that is a big. Most people that buy HMOs want to leave as little money in as possible. So the revenue, got into that one there. Obviously the revenue, the total gross income, but the average room rate versus the normal. You tend to get a feel for any particular area what the average would be, and if it's a good one or a bad one. It's you know, I can smell that sort of as I'm driving towards it down the motorway, and that gives me a platform to work back from. So I can start to give a high level valuation for some people, and then you think, hang on a minute, you're running costs, leaving money somewhere. It's, you know, something's going wrong because your net isn't quite what it should be. So we can start to peel back the layers, and then I can give advice. Well, maybe don't sell now, maybe start improving some of these optimizations, because this will mean 50 grand more on your sale price in a year's time. If someone said, here's an extra 50 grand on one of these properties, you take it. Obviously condition, maintaining the condition, I would say for you guys, I see this more when I go and see some established HMOs, the condition of that property comes into it. If you're developing and creating, it's more a case of maintaining the condition, putting proper budgets into sustainable items within that property that can be maintained, so you're constantly hitting that certain level of performance, so it doesn't at some point become a liability for the next buyer. Because so many people come to me when a HMO is just about to tip over the sort of edge of not being that nice, but it's just holding on to the room rate, the occupancy, the income still looks good. Buyer walks around and goes, well, shit, they're just going to give me the 50 grand headache, so I'm going to offer 75 grand less. So 5 grand a year just putting into it and maintaining it, you haven't got to take that reduction. So I'm looking at structural things. That's just fairly standard as a valuer that anyone would do. And then does that look like it matches? To me, that's like matches where they are in the actual country. But maybe you'll think, why have you put them like that? But when I was putting this, I did this for the Property and Popdoms National Meet as well. So no one could figure out why I just put them so randomly. So I thought I'd explain. But rough gross yields. Everything we're going to talk about now, most of the properties will fall in between those bands. And if you've got a bad HMO, you could go beyond the band. And if you've got something completely exceptional, you might pull that side of it. But there's bandings that I go, we're talking about the starting points here. So I go to an area and I think, all right, well, in the northwest, it's not going to be lower than that, and it's not going to be higher than that, probably. And I'm running through those other tests with the room rates. And so I can just give a little bit of help. I've got a HMO get me up shit helpline. It's like a direct dial. They phone me, it comes straight through. I can't get off my bridge. Can you help me? I need this. I need that. So, you know, I'm fairly proficient at helping with just this sort of high-level valuation. So, yeah. As everyone wants to take a picture of that, has got one, and we will elaborate on that a little bit further and go into a bit more detail. So, the property that I'm running through, I didn't choose a London property. But as we go through this thread, I'm going to make sure that I'm talking about the areas that have cropped up today as well. Because it's important to talk about a property that has got more risk to it, so the USPs or not USPs are going to affect value more. If we just plug in an 800 grand HMO bricks and mortar that's going to sell for 850 as a HMO, it's not really worth it as a case study. So, has everyone heard of Doncaster?
No.
Yeah, wonderful place. I got off the train and got laughed at immediately in Doncaster about 3 years ago. It's in like, hey, get out of this town. So let's assume this HMO in Doncaster, the bricks and mortar value of the non-HMO, the C3, the house next door, 140 grand. The one we're looking at is a 6-bed. So it's a C4, 6-person, in this case 6-bed. C4 HMO. It's bringing in 36 grand a year. I'm right in saying that's £600 a month, is it? So
500 a month, yeah. 500
a month per room times 6. So that's about, you know, that's Doncaster money really. That's probably where it needs to be. Excellent condition, absolutely brilliant condition. Because Omer decided one day just to drive to Doncaster and do a great HMO. So I'm thinking, all right, well, the yield expectation for a bad one would be up here, and for a good one would be down there. Or something particularly exceptional. But what we know at the moment on this is it's a C4, so lending isn't going to go really, really big. It's not sui generis, it's not got that economies of scale that we talked about. It's still a little bit linked to that bricks and mortar, but it's got good income, it's in excellent condition. It's in Article 4 because it's Doncaster, or not all Doncaster, Article 4. So I've attributed, you see that there, does that make sense?
Yeah.
13% gross yield. So on the basis of everything being well with that property, 13%, it's middling in terms of where it needs to be. To be fair, this used to be 12% gross yield, but now I value it at 13 because of the interest rates, the buyer market, just being a little bit more fairer on the buyers need to come in because their purchasing costs are a little bit higher. So yeah, so we're at a total of 276 for that property. I know that these are valuing right now still at 300 with the lenders. Just about, they're still coming in at 300. So that gives you the initial case study. So we're going to dig a little bit deeper and bear in mind that property at your back of your mind, or one that you're thinking about, or one that you own, or one that you're thinking of developing. We're running through a little dig deeper now, going into all of these variables. It might not change value, so I might say the same value. Saleability is the same as value a lot of the time, because if you get a buy, if it's unsaleable, or if a buyer comes in and knocks you down, it affects the same thing. So some increased saleability, some increased value, it's the same thing. So running costs, you get a feel for the running costs. What does everyone put in as allowance when they're doing their GEVs, and what do you put in for your allowance? You put 25% in before, didn't you?
20% on cost.
20% cost.
Generally, I think we're 11 to 15% on the refinancing calculator.
Okay. But for all the utilities and all of you, talking about utility, yeah, okay. So, you know, if you're optimising your running costs, if you've got the right installation, if everything's new, you know, you'll be at the leaner side. But if I go to a HMO which has got single pane windows, a knackered old boiler, and, you know, tenants that leave the doors open all day, then I'm going to flag that up. But it's going to affect something, because a buyer scrutiny is going to nail into this, and they're going to go, well, I liked it at 13% gross, but hang on a minute, it's £1,000 a month for gas and electricity. So something's got to give. Annual maintenance, that's something that buyers are, this digging deeper, even if the buyers are nailing in on this much more than they used to, because they've got stresses elsewhere with interest rates and purchasing costs. So they're more concerned about these things. Thanks to Wendy, the council tax now per room is obviously, that's not going through sort of, because that would have really hit this sales market right now, because properties are still selling. You add in the VOA, all of the HMOs would have been reduced in value pretty much. So it has helped saleability. And I had so many buyers during that period that were saying, I'm actually going to step away from HMOs because I'm worried about the VOA. And our sales team at the time had to sort of get them back on board and say, oh no, so it was a real victory, I think, the council tax. But cleaners, gardeners, voids, all of those things, digging deeper on the running costs, they all affect value and they all affect saleability. Going back to the original point, why this is important to you, I'm telling you that these are important for saleability, but if you just photograph it and put it down for yourself, if you never sell for the next 10 years, you're going to have a better optimised HMO personally. It's going to work better for you. There's certain stuff that we just don't talk about on the groups and on the, getting onto the right energy and gas. Is it competitive? Making sure that you're on top of your maintenance. How to manage your voids, how to manage your management. All of those certain stuff helps me, makes it more saleable. But for you, if you just do it anyway, if you're not thinking of selling, you're going to have a better optimised HMO. Compliance. So, licensed, obviously. So I don't know why I put those separate, because they should be next to each other really. So the license and the planning that they match. You've come to this room today. I'd imagine all of your HMOs, the license and the planning matches. That's what I would imagine. But if you go on Rightmove this afternoon in your area and go through, I'd imagine half of those HMOs have got something wrong. So many landlords go, I've got license for 7 people, so I've ticked off my sui generis, it's all completely fine. Constantly. So I'm trying to put as much content out, so just double check, does everything match? Tenancy requirements met. All of the right to rent, all of the deposits, all of these certain things, you're checking that you're constantly on top of that, or your agent is. So when you need to finally just make the decision to sell, you get that one buyer that goes, right, I've got the money now, I've had an inheritance, I want to buy that HMO. If they get into conveyancing and it falls down because the tenancies become a liability rather than an asset, the whole thing tumbles down. All these things are about building USPs that are an asset to you to increase the property's value above bricks and mortar. As soon as the tenants become a liability, you then got to try and kick them out, you've got to try and do, whatever it is. You're at bricks and mortar sale price. Because, you might get the lending, because the lender might not dig deep, but you're going to give that 100 grand back when it comes to selling. So it's really important to keep on top. All of the compliance stuff, that we all know is fairly irritating, but making sure we keep on top of it.
How are you valuing that differently? Because it's not an exact science, is it? You've obviously got some problems, but some people are still willing to look past that. So when you're attributing a value to that, what are you doing?
And this is where I say on the first slide, it's profiling buyer type.
Yeah.
So if I think that there might be a fund that's going to come in and purchase and just put their own tenant demographic in, then I'm kind of not having these conversations with certain people. But if you've got, I say as best practice, keep on top of those things, but we can't. We've got an industry with the HMO sales market where it's surviving on unicorn deals all the time. Yeah. It's surviving on little fluky sales that crop up. I'm just trying to have that consistency. So, you're going out to the bulk of the market, and you might get these little randoms where they don't really care because they're going in. They might be happy to. Oh, we just sold 2 in Portsmouth where it's a charity buying them, so one of them doesn't even need to be tenanted. And it doesn't even need to be furnished, so it's a new development, and he's like, okay, I'll just save 25 grand on furniture costs, and I've gotten the same price. Yeah. But you can't create consistency in the market based on another charity coming along next door. So, Article 4, obviously we've talked over and over again. Everyone know what Article 4 is by now? Yeah? Is it in place in that area? Is it coming in? How long's it been in? One of the key things, the common things that I get asked is, Article 4 is coming in Derby, so now it should be 9% gross yield rather than 10. Now Derby should be 12% gross yield, let alone 10. But everyone thinks Article 4 coming in, all of a sudden values go up. Barnsley, for example, they brought Article 4 in the whole of Barnsley, in all villages. So it doesn't always who was it? I think it was Ian that said, if you hear that the Article 4 is coming in, make hay while the sun shines, wasn't it, on the development? So if that advice is going out to everyone, that's going to flood the market for the nine months later, 3 months before the Article 4 deadline. All of a sudden, there's going to be 1,000 more HMO rooms coming onto the market because how's that going to affect lender support if Paragon Shore and all these lenders are suddenly going out to try and refinance all these HMOs at the same time? They're going to go, as Paragon have done in Doncaster before, they've just closed the book. Doncaster are giving nil valuations now in Barnsley, which I found out the hard way in about February. I sold 4 in Barnsley, and Paragon went, but they still took the money and went around knowing that that's their policy. Yeah, so, Article 4 coming in, ultimately over that longer period of time, it adds another USP to what we're doing, but it doesn't immediately often increase the value exponentially. As we've said, I wish I'd got the ability to put a phone slide on there, but lawful development certificates, people here that I'm selling for at the moment, where we've had that conversation prior, and we've made sure that lawful development has been applied for prior to sale. So by the time we've got the sale agreed and it goes through conveyancing, we've got the LDC in place. There's a seller at the moment where she's put, funny enough, it's the same as the Barnsley HMOs actually, we've sold those again, got the right lender product, and we've advised her before she listed to put the lawful development in. The buyer is now waiting for the LDC to come in place, but the lender won't lend, the completion can't take place unless it's in place. So, as you've heard with another couple of speakers previously, selling or not, and I would probably even just say Article 4 or just get that LDC in place. It's who's done it in London recently? Because I think is it about 109 quid still in London?
Yeah, but you need to do the drawings.
Yeah, you've got to do all that, but the application, it's not a massive expense,
No.
is what I'm trying to get at. It's not hundreds and hundreds of pounds, and it's now lenders are requesting it on it. So we're saying, if you're going to sell a HMO, you've got to have that in place.
Once
Whereas,
you have Article 4, it's really difficult to get it. You need to submit hundreds of documents to support existing use. And if you're missing 1 or 2 documents, they give you a lot of problems.
exactly, yeah. So this is preparation. This is what we're talking about, doing it in advance, getting this information now, because if you find that out when you've got a buyer on the hook, who is this unicorn buyer that's suddenly going to give you this money, and you find how difficult it is to get the lawful development certificate, your sale's going to fall through. Estate agents don't know this sort of stuff. They're not going to get this advice. When you go to training courses about HMOs, it's all about stopping at that refinance, usually. They don't tell you. So exactly what Joanne says, get these things. If it's going to be very difficult for your HMO, go through that pain 2 or 3 years in advance before you need to either refinance, when it becomes crucial for the refinance, or before you need to ultimately sell. Article 4, it's either being brought in because they're worried about saturation, as I said before with those 30 houses down in
Biggin Hill.
Or I'm worried if it's not there, is there saturation being created because you're all now. I remember a few years ago valuing HMOs in Doncaster quite a lot, selling because Doncaster was just this buzz thing for ages. Now it's Derby, isn't it? But loads of HMOs in Doncaster all the time. Next thing, 2 phone calls in one day. Can you come and value my HMO in Gainsborough? Where's Gainsborough? Never heard of it. And it's 20 miles along into Lincolnshire, just outside Doncaster, because there's no Article 4 there. So everyone goes, right, Doncaster's a shut shop, go to Gainsborough. Purely because they're going to Gainsborough to try and execute a BRR model. Private finance, increase the value, refinance. Have they even thought about the tenant types in Gainsborough? The sustainability, longevity of the rents at that level? Or they just thought, Doncaster doesn't work, let's go to the next available place that is going to be easy for me to raise private finance and do a development, which is, a recipe for disaster. So it lets me dictate what the supply and demand is, or establish what the supply and demand is, and I'm looking at, so it got brought up before. I use Property Filter just because I use it for other stuff, and it's got the same. I don't know if you on Property Filter, you do the drop-down map, and you can see the Article 4, same as the Article. What was your website called?
Article4maps.co.uk.
So Property Filter for me is the one, and then you've got to either have your ear on the ground locally, local networking groups, local property groups, or like I say, you've got 12 months. Was it Mitcham where it came in?
Merton.
It came in instantly.
Immediate, yeah.
Yeah. So again, it's very rare, but it does come in instantly. Managing agents. So you might not think that this is going to affect the value of your HMO or the saleability, but it really does. If I've got a HMO that's self-managed, for example, 100% occupancy, self-managed, tenants love that landlord, they've got a great relationship. I go and the first thing the landlord says to me is, I'm best friends with all these tenants, they all love me. I haven't had a void in 6 years actually. But it's a little bit under rented, but we've got 100% occupancy. Put it for sale, sell it to a new buyer. Next thing, Belvoir HMO management turns up, all the tenants leave. Because they haven't thought about the transferable management. So the worry that has from the buyer's perspective, making sure that there's some sort of transferable system in place that your new buyer can benefit from is really, really key for saleability, because people are making a decision at this stage to buy a ready-made HMO. They're not get your hands dirty people. They're not going to go in and self-manage. They're not going to go in and, or they don't develop where they can afford to maybe have in-house management. A lot of developers are building their own portfolio where they can have a couple of members of staff. They're not at that stage. They're buying one-off HMOs, and they need everything to be taken care of. So, yeah, occupancy rates, potential issues. The lease type that you've got in will really affect value and really affect saleability. Who's going to buy it? Going back to that question about who's actually going to buy the HMO and what they're going to pay and what the lender's going to refinance at. That devalues HMO in every single instance. So if you've got a rent-to-rent contract on your HMO, it's worth bricks and mortar value. Simple as that, because somebody else is taking the profit out of your HMO. So I've always normally got 3 or 4 rent-to-rent HMOs going through where I'm advising the client, get rid of the rent-to-rent, get your ASTs under control, have a standard HMO, and your value's going to go up. But working through it, again, service accommodation is really an area for that. So sometimes it's very difficult to sell, even though they say, oh, it's 20% gross yield because I'm doing nighttime stays. There's nothing tangible there, so the buyers get quite nervous about it to pay over bricks and mortar for something that's heavily, sort of labour intensive. Long lease, supported living, professionals working. I should have put student on there as well. They all have an impact on the valuation. So think carefully about what tenant type you're going to be putting in your property and how that affects value and how that affects your net refinance. Because a lot of people refinance on normal ASTs and then they put Serco in and they're breaching their mortgage product, breaching their insurance. And then they come to refinance and the lender goes, hold on a minute, this isn't what I expected. You're on the wrong product. So, you're in a completely different interest rate level. So just going back to that case study, if this digging deeper, we're at 276, so now I drive to the property and have a look at it, running costs are great, or it's in or outside Article 4, the managing agent is really bad, historical occupancy is a bit patchy, the tenant type, actually the landlord didn't say that there's a rent-to-rent operator, not managing agent. What will happen to that gross yield? It'll increase, or it probably won't go down from that, to be honest, because it's only C4. The things that will make that go down will be economies of scale, sui generis, that kind of thing. But you can understand that it's just so much more than just that gross yield. But the reason why it's worth me talking about it is because doing all of the dig deeper anyway on your portfolio, on your individual properties, you maintain that consistent saleability and value. Other things to consider, the lending level, the buyer type, the cost of lending. I get so annoyed with these brochures that come out. It says guaranteed government-backed lease, all bills included. And it says so the gross is the net. Well, I had one the other day. It said, nothing to deduct, except I asked the landlord, "What's your interest rate?" He said 7.9%. That's the loan that I've managed to get. Well, if it's a difference between 5% with normal tenants or that extra 2.9%, there's your running cost. So even though it's all no bills included social housing lease, you've got to pay through the nose to get the right product. So, and as we talked about before, selling time frame. If you're in a hurry, something's got to give, really. So preparation, understanding who your buyer types are, and keeping your HMO optimised for sale, so your time frame is nice and relaxed. You will obviously get a better exit. And why is all this important to you? So you're probably going to fit into one of these categories there. Optimisation anyway. Planning for your future exit. This information, getting in touch with me and keeping in touch with me, as I've done with a few people in this room, might help your valuation class. You might suddenly say, you haven't got soul confidence at the end, have you? You haven't got, so obviously I'm valuing hundreds all the time. Better preparation for your valuation packs. Clearer GDV estimates, so you're not just like this, constantly thinking, shit, I hope that's going to value up. And again, the further north you go, or the lower the bricks and mortar baseline goes, that gets more sort of fluctuating. You know, asking the right questions if you're coming in as an investor. So if you just buy your first HMO, looking at these slides, going back over them, you're able to ask the right question of a ready-made HMO that you see that's for sale on Rightmove. So it could just be as simple as, you know, DD for a buyer. And if you own HMO, maintaining that constantly that we've just gone through will increase and hold the value of your HMOs constantly, which is really important. So we arrived. Q&A, that good timing?
Yeah, perfect timing.
So, anyone got any questions about any specific values? Yeah, so usually, go on, John.
Any advice about, you know, when you have the surveyor coming to do mortgage valuation? How do you help?
Well, the advice I would say is don't over leverage and push. But where you are, you're less immune to that. I mean, more immune to that. You're better. I think your advice, with your experience of where you're at, you've got your own comps, you've got your own sold comps, you've got your own brand. So you're probably in a position where your valuation packs are probably as good as they probably can be. But moving it back to the individuals, a lot of people can learn from, you know, your experience and your comps, and I think a lot of it for GDV packs is networking, understanding. You know, I found landlords are quite good at being, you know, helpful to each other. I mean, sometimes I go and talks at the crew property meet or this little property meet here, and they're quite collaborative and they help each other with GDVs and comps. And if you can get that sold data, makes a massive, you know, that's really, you've had that, which is you can keep that consistent level. But if you're just constantly relying on refinancing all the time, you know, at some point you're going to have to throw a sale in there. Okay.
I've got a planning happening at the minute for a large HMO. I'm looking to either sell it once it's got planning gain,
Yeah.
or to develop and sell it as a complete project. What would be your advice in terms
Where
of
is it,
two
James?
options? Hull.
Hull.
Yeah.
Let someone else make a margin, I'd say. Sell with the planning. Hull, the expectations, the 20% gross yield worry me in Hull, that cluttered all over Rightmove. It's not that competitive in terms of the yield. So if you create a product, it's going to be brand new, your room rents are going to be better than the average, and because you've developed, put your money into the build, and you probably spent the contingency, you're probably going to need a fairly competitive gross yield exit. So I'd probably say if you've got enough margin in Hull, how big is it?
32.
Okay. If it's a 32, your buyer type would need to be somebody that's got their own tenant type. So you're looking at speaking with the local councils, trying to find the demand, speaking to local providers in that area that might want to put a lease in place so you can sell to a cash buyer or sell to a hands-off. Because if that was just standard tenants in there, and you're trying to sell to, because no one in Hull is going to buy a finished 32-bedroom HMO in Hull. Because if anyone's local in Hull, they're going to be developing themselves. So you've got to think you're focusing on an out-of-area buyer when you've got that finished product. So that out-of-area buyer is going to shit their pants with 32 individuals running around an HMO and relying on a managing agent to manage it, aren't they? I know you can take care of that yourself, but yeah, that's the mindset of the buyer. There's a lot of risk. So I think with something like that, adding in some sort of secure lease in there, but doing it, making sure that the covenants, making sure that the lending can be approved on that type of lease, and doing a lot of work pre-now. And you may even find, like the ones in Portsmouth that I've got, that, you know, there's a lot of developers that I work with, probably 10 or 12 developers across the country, where every third or fourth HMO they're selling with me as a brand new HMO. It's my job then. I don't know if you see me on Facebook and I do a lot of walk arounds with developers. I do a lot of
Facebook? You're not on Facebook?
Yeah, I post every day at 5 a.m. I have a bath every morning at 5 and I sit there, lock the door for the kids, and I just do a post every day. So it's just true. And but a lot of developers are selling every third or fourth HMO as a strategy now to keep money moving. And so I was in Sittingbourne on Tuesday with Matt. His first HMO in a new area. He's selling it because he knows that that's going to give him the key to 3 refinances at that same level. So rather than going in with private investors, trying to sell a new area, first thing he's doing is a brand new HMO sale. So buyers, you can either sell them brand new, and they love that, and it's a different buyer type, or you've got buyer types that want the comfort of year-on-year occupancy. I want to see that actually this is working. So there's two types of buyer mindset. But again, it comes down to preparation. If I know you've got a flip coming up, I'll start to know about the property 6 months in advance. We'll do a little bit of content. I'll get stuff out of the database. Might meet a couple of buyers. Oh, there's one coming up. So when it's coming to finishing off the site, when it's coming close to ending, we've got a buyer lined up and they can go through and you've got your HMO flip. Yeah.
Hi, Richard. I was just going to say, I've got one I'm looking at, 9 in Warrington. Would you say 13.5 to 14% in good condition is a fair?
Yeah, I would actually,
Yeah?
to be honest.
Not
And it used to be 12.5. Warrington's popular actually. Warrington's little pocket,
Yeah.
because trying to get a little bit of value outside. The train station's good. People, it's still got that Manchester mindset. I know of 2 refinances recently at 12%, which was 25% off at 9. But on a sale, I would probably, I might surprise you at 13, but if your expectations are you can make it stack at a sale at 13.5, depending on, like I say, condition, what it is. But yeah, Warrington's very popular, to be honest.
Yeah, because they had the valuation coming at 13.5. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that one I'm looking at, well, we came in, funny enough, at Derby, and blew my mind. Alveston, London Road, you might like.
London Road, yeah.
Like, I mean, it did come at 11.5, but sorry, 11% at 660. But the house literally is a brick. That's what worried me.
Yeah,
literally
Derby's
300k.
Yeah,
I was like, well,
I'm. That's why when I said about Derby,
yeah,
I'm cheaper, i.e. high yield, than Shawbrook, because for some reason Shawbrook still signing checks in Derby, but that's going to stop because obviously you've got Article 4 coming in March as well. So there are these. This comes back what we've talked about. Everything that we talk about. We never actually talk about tenant sustainability and who are these people and are they going to pay that high premium for the long term. So if you know your local areas and you're developing locally, so we're in London now, if you're operating within 30 minutes of where you live, you know those tenants and you know you've got a sustainable product. But if you're going up north, are these tenants going to be paying 650, 700, 750 for these rooms? When you come to your next refinance in 3 to 5 years and your rent roll's gone down by 20% because it's no longer a brand new premium and there's saturation in the market, you're having to get another angel investor to put money into refinance from your BRR deal. See it all the time.
these studio rooms were literally like reserved at 900, 950. These are London prices.
It's not sustainable, but
It's not,
they're on the short-term contracting market there, which is a little micro probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice one.
Right, I'm going to stop questions there just because we've gone past a little bit, but that was amazing. Thank you so much.